Today I took my classic shortbread recipe and I revamped it with plenty of rich chocolate flavor. We're also going to dip them in some melted chocolate, topped with a few sprinkles. This makes shortbread fun, but still stays true to those nice buttery, crumbly roots. Also, the recipe is super easy to make. It's great for your Christmas cookie tray, Valentine's Day, any time of year. So let me show you how to make it. We're going to start with 1 cup of unsalted butter. It's 226 grams. Key note about the butter, you are going to want it to have a little bit of a chill to it still. You don't want it to be softened to room temperature completely, though I do usually set mine out for about an hour before I bake with it. You don't want it to be melty, greasy. You want it to still be a little chilled at the center. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to whip this butter until it is light and creamy. So grab your electric mixer. It's going to make your life a lot easier. Or you can use your stand mixer with the paddle attachment. Today I'm just using my handheld one. We're going to beat this until it is nice and creamy. Sometimes when the butter is a little cold, it'll try to clump in your mixer, and then it's not going to get whipped like we want it to, so pause and knock that out of there. Butter everywhere. Told you this would be exciting. The skill one, Nikki. Okay, so this is about like 2 to 3 minutes of creaming the butter and then some scraping the bowl in between to make sure we're getting all of it. It's just nice, a little bit lightened and creamy. Of course, shortbread needs to be lightly sweetened, and powdered sugar works really well for giving us that light texture that you look for in classic shortbread. This is 3/4 cup or 95 grams. Probably shouldn't have added all that once. I'm going to start getting this a little bit absorbed, and then we'll add our chocolate. Keep your mixer on low for this part, that way you don't send powdered sugar flying everywhere. Next, we're going to add 1/4 cup of cocoa powder. Highly recommend a Dutch processed cocoa powder. I tried this recipe both ways, and the Dutch cocoa just gives you a much deeper and overall better flavor. So this is 25 grams. Again, let's try to keep our mixer on low. I'm really bad at that because, you know, when there are cookies on the horizon, I'm really impatient. So I'm guilty of turning up the speed too high and making a mess. See, I can't even control myself when I'm on camera and demonstrating. Pause for a second, do a nice scrape. Plus, I left way too much butter on this spatula. This is embarrassing. You want that in your cookies. My gosh, we almost had a disaster on our hands. We do not waste butter here. Let's finish mixing this. All right, next we're going to add a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now, some purists will say shortbread does not have vanilla extract in it. You know, if you want your shortbread to be boring, you can certainly leave it out, but it's just so much better with vanilla extract. Most things are better with vanilla extract. That's a teaspoon of vanilla extract. We're also going to add our salt here. You need a 1/2 teaspoon of table salt, and we will mix until these ingredients are well incorporated. And then finally, our flour. You will need 2 cups or 250 grams of all-purpose flour for this recipe. I'm going to add it gradually. And once I'm adding the flour, it's very important that everything be well incorporated, but you don't want to overmix. And mostly that's because you don't want the butter to start to get too melty. Like we did all that work in the beginning, we don't need to go crazy here. Shortbread has a tendency to be crumbly, like have a crumbly or drier dough. Everything needs to be combined, just don't go overboard. Another nice thing about this recipe is it's a 1 bowl recipe. We're still too crumbly here, but I do want to pause a moment and scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl because that's going to help get all of the ingredients well incorporated. And there's no egg, no leavening agents in this recipe. That is characteristic of shortbread. I'm going to stop here. Let's take a look at the dough, and I'm going to go the rest of the way with my spatula and just kind of form the dough, make sure the dough clings together. There are no dry spots remaining. Oh, there's a dry pocket. I'm glad I checked. That's gonna need a little bit more mixing. So a lot of times with our cookie dough, it's just like one big ball of dough completely clinging to itself. Just stopping a little short of that where we're still a little bit separated. The dough must be uniform and there must not be any dry spots or butter streaks remaining. So your shortbread will need to chill. So what we're going to do is we are going to wrap it in plastic or parchment paper if you prefer, that would also be fine. I recommend dividing into 2 parts because I prefer to work with half of the dough at a time. It helps keep the dough from getting too warm or being overhandled. I'm going to put about half of the dough. This doesn't have to be exact. All right, important note, this needs to come together into a smooth ball or a smooth disc. Otherwise, when you roll it out, it's going to crack. I kind of keep my hands a little bit clean here and just use the plastic to help me form it into a ball. Again, we don't want to overhandle it. We just want to make sure everything's sticking together nicely so we don't have any issues when we go to roll it out. And then we're going to form it into a flat disc, about 1 inch thick. And making it flatter rather than round is going to help it chill more evenly and more quickly so we can get to our cookies faster. ahead around the edges a bit because it'll look prettier that way. All right, this dough is going to go into our refrigerator. It's going to need to chill for 30 minutes. While you can chill it longer, just know that the colder the dough gets, the more prone it is to cracking when you roll it out. And if you chill it a lot longer than 30 minutes, you're probably going to need to let it just sit at room temperature for a bit before you can roll it without it cracking. While the dough is chilling, let's get our oven preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, it's been about 30 minutes and our oven should be about to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So let's roll out our dough. A couple things. You are going to want to lightly flour the surface you're using. And I'm also going to very lightly flour the rolling pin. We're going to roll the dough out to be about a 1/4 inch thick. I don't like to go too thin with shortbread. I prefer it to be a little bit thicker. Now, some people are going to comment that they prefer to use cocoa powder instead of flour when they're working with a chocolate cookie dough. You are absolutely fine to do that, but I personally don't prefer to for a couple reasons. One is that cocoa powder is simply messier to use, but also it's a lot more drying than flour. And cocoa powder is bitter. So I actually don't like the results. Like, sure, you can't see it as well as you can see the flour, but you know, the flour can be dusted off, should be dusted off. And I feel like you get a better tasting cookie by using flour. That's my personal opinion. So that's why I use flour. Like I said, I like these to be a little bit on the thicker side. So let's cut out a few of these. Keep your cuts nice and close. Of course, you're going to want to regroup your scraps, but every time you do that, you're working the dough a little bit more. You want to minimize the chance of overdoing it. And yeah, you can dust off any flour, but if it's just a little bit, it should bake into the cookie just fine. I'll do some stars. Every time you re-roll your scraps, you're going to be rolling in a bit more flour and working the dough a little bit more. So ideally, you want to do this as little as possible. And if you want to double this cookie dough, it does double pretty nicely, actually. All right, these are now going to the center rack of our 350 degree Fahrenheit preheated oven. They're going to need to bake for 12 to 14 minutes before they're finished baking. If you rolled your cookies thinner, you will definitely need a little bit less time. The key here is that once the shortbread is cooled, it should be nice and crisp. Unlike a sugar cookie where we're aiming for the center to be a little soft, shortbread we try to keep it crisp throughout, so we want to make sure we're baking it all the way through. If you go too far, it's going to be dry. All right, once the cookies have finished baking, I like to let them cool on the baking sheet for like 10 minutes, and then you can remove them to a cooling rack to cool completely. Chocolate shortbread cookies are perfect for enjoying, you know, as is, no toppings. But my favorite thing to do is be a little bit extra, and I will melt some dark chocolate. This is actually my favorite couverture chocolate. I use it for melting all the time. Remind me to link to it, and I will try to remember to link to it for you. And I like to just dip the cookies, and I don't usually dip them all the way, like a nice little half dip. Looks really pretty, in my opinion. And then I also like to sprinkle with some nonpareils. Isn't that cute? Oh, you could do red and green ones for Christmas and customize. The options are endless. Oh, and I'm using 6 ounces of my couverture chocolate. That seems to be a good amount for me to decorate all my cookies. And just keep in mind, all of my cookies aren't pictured. I had that whole second half of dough that you didn't watch me bake. I always keep wax paper under my cooling rack when I'm dipping these cookies. And if I'm letting the chocolate harden on a wire rack, I will usually kind of nudge them a little bit after they've been sitting for a while, just so they don't solidify around the wire, which can sometimes cause them to break. All right, Nikki asked me to not sprinkle all of them because she doesn't like sprinkles, so I'm not sure we're actually related. I know I told you I'm not super patient with these cookies, but it is worth it to let the chocolate set completely, just because you get a really nice added texture. It's not the same when the chocolate's melty. You can pop them in the fridge for a couple minutes to speed up the process if you'd like. If you tried this one, I would love to know what you think. I really do always love hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. The texture, that shortbread texture, buttery, light, perfectly crumbly. So good. I feel like short wrap. Did you clean this after you dropped it on the floor? I don't know where I'm going with this. Oh my goodness. Tragedy. I was looking at the cookie and I went to grab the sprinkles, but I dipped my hand in the chocolate instead. That's my sign to stop sprinkling. Nikki did that. That's fine.